you marry me?
Well, let me think about it. Yes.
Nearly 40 years after Spaceballs sent a flying Winnebago across the galaxy, Rick Moranis stepped back beneath Dark Helmet's enormous helmet. The reunion carried a perfect irony. Mel Brooks's movie had mocked sequels, merchandising, Hollywood greed, and the endless recycling of successful ideas. Now, a real sequel was on the way. But the original production was stranger than the parody itself. One actor agreed to repeat the most famous death of his career. A hidden performer endured a costume that became almost unbearable. And George Lucas placed one boundary around the film that Brooks transformed into a legendary joke. Here are 14 weird facts you may not know about Spaceballs. Number 14. John Hurt agreed to suffer his most horrifying death twice. In 1979, John Hurt became the victim at the center of one of science fiction's most unforgettable scenes. His character in Alien sat down for an ordinary meal. Then, something began moving inside his chest. 8 years later, Mel Brooks asked Hurt to go through it again. This time, the setting was not a grim industrial spaceship. It was a roadside diner somewhere in the Spaceballs universe. Hurt's customers suddenly felt the same terrible pain. The creature burst through his shirt, and he looked down with the exhausted recognition of a man trapped in the same nightmare twice. Oh no, not again.
Cho sức mạnh kỹ xảo thời bấy giờ mang lại cảm giác tốc độ cực kỳ phấn khích. Bất cứ đứa trẻ nào sau khi xem Star Wars thì tôi chắc chắn.
That line made the cameo more than a copied visual gag. Brooks had persuaded the original victim to return and acknowledge the reference himself. Then the scene took one final turn. The newborn creature did not escape into the ventilation system. It lifted a straw hat, produced a cane, and danced across the counter while performing, "Hello, Ma Baby." Hurt never winked at the audience. He played the pain and disbelief seriously, allowing the creature to supply the absurdity. Spaceballs turned one of cinema's most frightening deaths into old-fashioned show business, with the original victim delivering both the recognition and the punchline. Number 13. The performer inside Dot Matrix worked in desert heat that reached 110 degrees. Dot Matrix was created by two very different performers. Joan Rivers supplied the sharp voice, the rapid timing, and the jokes that made the robot sound as though she had already lost patience with everyone around her. But the body belonged to Lorene Yarnell. Yarnell was a professional mime. Her career depended on precise physical control. Yet Spaceballs placed her inside a brass-colored, metal-looking shell that concealed most of her body and restricted the movements audiences would normally use to read a performer. The most difficult scenes were filmed near Yuma, Arizona. Mel Brooks later recalled temperatures climbing as high as 110 degrees. Yarnell still had to walk, react, and maintain Dot Matrix's mechanical rhythm while enclosed in the costume under the desert sun. The location created another problem. Every walk across the sand left footprints. After a take, the untouched desert was no longer untouched. The crew had to bring out blowers or sand brooms and restore the surface before the cameras could roll again. One mistake could mean repeating the entire process in the same heat. On screen, Dot Matrix appears polished, controlled, and nearly indestructible. The reality was a performer working inside a rigid shell while the location fought every additional take. One woman supplied the voice, the other carried the physical burden. Number 12. The Star Wars spoof's hero had never seen Star Wars, and Mel Brooks struggled to find his comic voice. Bill Pullman was hired to play a hero built from two of the most recognizable characters in modern movies. Lone Star carried the swagger of Han Solo and the heroic destiny of Luke Skywalker. Pullman had never seen Star Wars. Spaceballs was also one of his first major film roles. When a scene depended on a specific reference, he relied on Mel Brooks to explain what the movie was mocking. That was only part of the difficulty. Pullman later recalled that Brooks had trouble defining Lone Starr because the character lacked an obvious comic voice or signature routine. Dark Helmet had the costume and the temper. Barf had the ears, tail, and John Candy's warmth. Brooks himself could disappear into President Scroob or Yogurt. Lone Starr had to remain recognizable as the hero without becoming a weak imitation of someone else. During rehearsals, Brooks once noticed that Pullman looked exhausted. He warned that he did not want the actor to reach the publicity tour and only then discover how the lines should have been played. Pullman could not compete with Moranis, Candy, and Brooks by becoming louder. He held the center instead. That distance from Star Wars may have helped. Lone Starr reacts to the insanity around him without sounding like an actor performing a Harrison Ford impression. Someone had to keep a straight face while the galaxy went plaid. Number 11. Rick Moranis was so funny, he kept ruining the takes. Dark Helmet's private doll scene feels too perfectly embarrassing to have been created by accident. The commander of Spaceball 1 hides in his room and acts out a romantic fantasy using small figures of Lone Starr, Princess Vespa, and himself. He changes voices, creates the conversation, and gives the most powerful villain in the movie the emotional life of a jealous child. Then Colonel Sandurs walks in. The mighty Dark Helmet is caught playing with his dolls again. Mel Brooks provided the situation, but Rick Moranis improvised the performance. Moranis later remembered the scene as unscripted, while Brooks credited him with creating one of the character's most famous moments. The problem was that Brooks could not remain quiet behind the camera. He later admitted that Moranis cost him money because Brooks ruined so many takes by breaking into laughter during the performance. A broken take meant stopping, resetting the actors and props, and trying to recreate timing that had felt spontaneous only moments earlier. On an effects-heavy production, even a small delay could spread into the rest of the schedule. Yet the disruption proved how completely Moranis understood the character. The helmet made Dark Helmet visually ridiculous. The improvisation revealed the insecure man underneath it. Dark Helmet was supposed to terrorize the galaxy. Instead, he became dangerous to the shooting schedule. Number 10. The flying Winnebago was harder to build than the giant warship. Spaceball 1 was 17 feet long, filled with lights and designed to transform into Mega-Maid. Yet the effects crew said the smaller Eagle 5 created more difficult problems. The reason was familiarity. Audiences had never stood beside a real intergalactic warship. They had seen Winnebagos on American highways. The miniature, therefore, had to match the full-sized vehicle closely enough to survive quick cuts between the two. The windows, body panels, proportions, and even the doorknob could be examined. A wrong detail would expose the model immediately. Eagle 5 also needed moving features and motion control motors. All of that machinery had to fit into a relatively small interior. Chief model maker Grant McCune compared it to trying to place 10 pounds of equipment inside a 5-pound box. The reflective exterior added another complication. A badly placed light could create a reflection that interfered with the photographic process used to combine the ship with space. The giant imaginary warship could use scale, darkness, and distance to protect the illusion. The Winnebago had nowhere to hide. Spaceballs could invent the largest cruiser in the galaxy. Counterfeiting an ordinary recreational vehicle closely enough to fool the audience was harder. Number 9. Dark Helmet was almost one enormous walking helmet. Dark Helmet's costume makes a promise before Rick Moranis says a word. The black uniform, mechanical breathing, and towering headpiece suggest a villain with the power of Darth Vader. Then the visor rises. Behind it is Moranis, wearing glasses and looking like a man who can barely survive his own entrance. According to Moranis' recollection, the original idea went even further. The screenplay described the entire costume as one gigantic helmet. The character would not simply wear an oversized headpiece, he would effectively be walking around inside it. The concept was reduced to the exaggerated helmet seen in the finished film. That change protected the most valuable part of the performance, Moranis's face. His reactions could now contradict everything the costume promised. The uniform suggested authority. His expression revealed impatience, insecurity, and wounded pride. The scale of the helmet also made Dark Helmet seem emotionally smaller. He looked like a man carrying more power than he could physically or psychologically manage. Had Moranis disappeared inside a full-body prop, the joke might have ended with the costume. The production found something funnier than a walking helmet. It found the small man hiding behind it. Number 8. A 2-minute joke required a 17-foot spaceship. The opening shot of Spaceballs begins by recalling Star Wars. A gigantic ship moves slowly across the screen. Then it keeps moving and moving. Mel Brooks recalled that the pass lasts nearly 2 minutes, an eternity for a joke whose entire point is refusing to end. The production could not create that effect with a casual model. Spaceball 1 measured 17 feet long, making it one of the largest spacecraft miniatures built for a movie. Its design required dozens of blueprint sheets. A thick internal tube formed the ship's spine. Neon tubes and fiber optics created the lights, while model makers covered the exterior with enough detail to sell its impossible scale. The model also had to become mega-made. That transformation required moving sections, mechanical hardware, and additional shots when the simpler version failed to communicate the size of the change. Even photographing the finished ship was difficult. From the wrong angle, the long body compressed into what one crew member compared to a pipe covered in bumps. The camera team had to choose views that restored the illusion of enormous length. Months of drafting, construction, wiring, and mechanical engineering supported one deliberately unreasonable idea. The ship had to look completely serious so Mel Brooks could refuse to end the shot. Number 7. John Candy's mechanical costume kept fighting his comedy. John Candy's comedy depended on timing that felt effortless. As Barf, part of that timing belonged to machinery. The costume used animated dog ears and a moving tail to make the half-man, half-dog character react before Candy even spoke. Production notes described Candy controlling the tail through a hidden button in his costume. The ears were different. Candy could not simply decide when they rose, folded, or reacted. Those expressions depended on a second performer reading the same scene from outside the costume. Creature effects artist Rick Lazzarini built and puppeteered them remotely. He later explained that a cable-operated controller allowed him to shape both ears while following Candy around the set. That meant Barf's face was being performed by 2 people at once. Candy controlled his voice and body. Lazzarini had to anticipate the actor's rhythm and make the ears land on the same joke. Sometimes the mechanics became too successful. Lazzarini recalled Mel Brooks warning that the ears did not need to move so much because they were pulling attention away from other actors. Brooks also remembered the tail as occasionally having a mind of its own. Candy adjusted without making Barf feel mechanical. He could still improvise a line after the Winnebago crash, then let the ears and tail add a second layer of reaction. The equipment did not stop his comedy. It forced his comedy to share the beat with a hidden puppeteer. And somehow, the finished performance still feels as warm and spontaneous as John Candy himself. Number 6. Mel Brooks put a dollar value on every special effects joke. Spaceballs needed convincing effects for 2 different reasons. Some shots moved the story forward. Others existed only to earn a laugh. Visual effects supervisor Peter Donen said the crew separated those categories and then asked an unusually direct question about every comedy shot. Was it a $100,000 joke or a $10,000 joke? The distinction could decide whether an idea survived. If an effect was simpler than Brooks expected, he might ask the team to create 2 jokes instead of 1. If it cost far more than he believed the laugh deserved, he would set a lower limit. A $50,000 effect might become, in his judgment, only a $25,000 joke. The crew then had to redesign it for the lower price or remove it from the picture. That was the hidden arithmetic behind the silliness. A few seconds of spacecraft movement could require design work, model construction, lighting, motion control photography, and optical finishing. A spontaneous-looking gag might consume weeks before an audience ever saw it. Brooks was not dismissing the work. He was protecting the balance between production value and comic value. They were not only asking whether the joke was funny, they were asking exactly how much that laugh was worth. Number 5. The performer inside Pizza the Hutt refused to wear the costume again. Pizza the Hutt appears for only one scene, but creating him became a production problem large enough for 2 performers. Dom DeLuise supplied the voice. The physical character was a fiberglass shell covered in foam latex, real pizza toppings, and colored pancake batter used as dripping cheese. Effects artist Richard Caron wore the suit for the original photography. When the production needed additional footage, Caron did not return to the costume. According to creature effects artist Rick Lazzarini, Caron's response was direct. He was not wearing that thing again. Lazzarini was chosen to replace him because he had helped develop the character's effects and already knew the suit. That knowledge did not make the experience comfortable. Lazzarini remembered a costume weighing roughly 25 pounds, with thick hoses running up his back to carry the pancake batter. The head assembly pulled against his neck, visibility was poor, and the batter could leak into his eyes and mouth during a take. It took roughly 2 hours to put everything on. Between takes, pans caught the batter so it could be reused, and the pumps had to be prepared again before the fake cheese could continue flowing. Lazzarini performed partly blind, trying to hit his marks while barely seeing the actor beside him. The reshoot produced the grotesque character Brooks wanted. It also required the creature effects artist who understood the machinery to climb inside it after the first performer decided once was enough. Number 4. Mel Brooks and Rick Moranis did not always agree on what was funny. The improvised doll scene shows how much freedom Rick Moranis received on Spaceballs. It also points to a creative difference between the actor and his director. Bill Pullman recalled that Moranis often wanted to push a comic idea further than Mel Brooks did. Brooks preferred to refine the exact wording and construction of a line. Moranis came from an ensemble tradition that encouraged performers to explore the larger concept of a scene. John Candy brought a similar background. Brooks allowed Moranis to improvise, but that did not mean every idea was accepted without resistance. Pullman remembered moments when the atmosphere became tense because no comedian wants to tell another comedian that something is not funny. The disagreement was creative, not personal warfare. There is no reliable basis for turning it into a feud. Brooks praised Moranis' performance, and Moranis' best improvisations remained in the movie. But the tension mattered. Spaceballs had to combine Brooks' carefully built verbal comedy with the looser timing of performers shaped by sketch and ensemble work. The doll scene came from that freedom. Brooks' control kept the surrounding movie from becoming a collection of disconnected improvisations. The final rhythm belongs to both approaches. The laughter came from cooperation. Cooperation did not always require agreement. Number 3. Veterans of Star Wars effects helped Spaceballs mock it convincingly. Mel Brooks did not hide Spaceballs from George Lucas. He sent Lucas the script and explained what he intended to parody. Brooks later recalled arranging some post-production work through Lucas's operation, partly because he wanted to cooperate with the people who might otherwise have objected. The major miniature work, however, was handled by Apogee. not by Lucasfilm itself. Apogee had been founded by John Dykstra, the effects pioneer whose earlier work helped transform Star Wars into a visual landmark. The company was selected because its team had deep experience with the type of science fiction imagery Spaceballs needed to reproduce. Effects photography even began before principal photography, giving the miniature unit an early start on a schedule that would eventually include roughly 150 planned shots. One crew member recalled that many of the artists had worked on at least one of the productions the movie was borrowing from. Some had worked on Star Wars. Others brought experience from Star Trek the Motion Picture, or Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They were not outsiders making cheap copies of famous effects. They understood the original visual language from inside the industry. That knowledge allowed the ships and transformations to appear sincere before the comedy undercut them. Spaceball 1 could look imposing. Eagle 5 could move like a legitimate screen spacecraft. Megamaid could be engineered with absurd seriousness. The parody worked because the craft was not treated as a joke. In an unusual piece of Hollywood irony, veterans of the science fiction revolution helped recreate its imagery for Mel Brooks. The target helped sharpen the weapon. Number 2. Mel Brooks said the safe gold paint nearly killed him. Yogurt's golden face looks harmlessly ridiculous. For Mel Brooks, the makeup became the most personal danger on the production. Brooks later recalled being assured that the gold material was non-toxic. During filming, fumes from the paint triggered what he described as a life-threatening rash. His eyes reacted badly, and he kept taking Benadryl to fight the allergy while the work continued. Brooks called the reaction terrible and dangerous. He went further, saying that he nearly died. That severity is his own recollection, not an independently documented medical conclusion. But the practical consequence was clear enough. The director, producer, co-writer, and star was reacting to material applied directly to his face in the middle of production. Brooks was not playing one small role that could easily be removed. He appeared as both Yogurt and President Scroob while also directing everyone around him. Production records indicate that Yogurt's scenes had to be scheduled in a way that gave him relief from the makeup's effects. The situation carried a particularly strange contrast. Spaceballs was filled with expensive models, mechanical transformations, optical work, and complicated costumes. Those systems were designed, tested, and operated by specialized crews. Yet the danger Brooks remembered most vividly did not come from a 17-foot spacecraft or a moving machine. It came from supposedly safe material brushed directly onto the director's face. Number 1. George Lucas had one rule, and it created the movie's most famous joke. Before production began, Mel Brooks sent the Spaceballs screenplay to George Lucas. Brooks wanted to give the creator of Star Wars a clear warning about what was coming. Lucas read the script, knew the movie would parody his characters and universe, and gave Brooks his blessing. But he added one condition: no Spaceballs action figures. Lucas explained that toys based on Dark Helmet, Lone Star, and the other characters could look too much like Star Wars products. The similarity could create problems for Lucas's lawyers, studio, and business affairs department. Brooks agreed. Then he turned the restriction into comedy. Inside the movie, Dark Helmet secretly plays with small figures of Lone Star, Princess Vespa, and himself. The villain can have the dolls as a private humiliation, but audiences could not buy official versions of them. The larger payoff arrives when Yogurt explains where the real money from a movie is made: merchandising. He displays the Spaceballs t-shirt, coloring book, lunchbox, breakfast cereal, and the product no responsible family franchise should ever sell to children: the Spaceballs flamethrower. The sequence mocks the commercial empire surrounding blockbuster movies. But according to Brooks, The exchange with Lucas helped inspire it. The limitation did not weaken the satire, it gave the satire a precise target. And Brooks kept his promise. The action figures seen in the movie were not released as a commercial toy line. Decades later, the joke has acquired another layer. The franchises Spaceballs mocked became larger. Their merchandise spread into nearly every kind of product. Sequels, prequels, reboots, legacy characters, and cinematic universes became normal parts of Hollywood business. Now, Spaceballs itself is returning. Rick Moranis has publicly stepped back into Dark Helmet's helmet, and the official sequel is called Spaceballs, the New One. The movie that joked about meeting again in a sequel made for more money is becoming a franchise continuation of its own. That does not make the original joke weaker. It makes it feel less like an exaggeration and more like a prediction. Nearly 40 years later, Dark Helmet is lowering the visor again. The Schwartz has returned. And this time, there really is more money to search for.